And welcome to CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead, President Biden set to sign his $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill into law today. We'll bring you the latest. Plus, while the United States remains divided over how to deal with the crisis on the southern border, one European nation has taken strong action, even in the face of severe criticism.
We will protect our border, we will withstand the pressure, and we will continue to stick to our own right to make our own decision.
And a fifth grader receives an unexpected Christmas present, a visit from her mom at school. We'll tell you why it was so special. All this and more are ahead next.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And we begin this half hour with another sign of tough economic times. Dollar Tree raising prices on some items by as much as $1.50. It comes as America faces its highest inflation rate in 30 years. And President Biden sees an all-time low approval rating. That despite signing the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill into law today. And it's raising questions for passing his nearly $2 trillion Build Back Better Act. Dale Hurd is on the story.
As the House prepares to take up Part 2 of Joe Biden's spending plan, the $1.75 trillion Build Back Better Act, his plummeting poll numbers raise the question, can he get the political support he needs to pass it? Biden's approval rating stands at 41%, the lowest of his presidency. 55% disapprove of his handling of the economy. And if the midterm elections were held today, Americans would vote 51% Republican and only 41% Democrat, the widest margin since 1981. Inflation is the highest in 30 years, 6.2%. One sign of the times, Dollar Tree has announced it will be raising prices on some items by as much as $1.50. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says it's the pandemic and not all the big spending in Washington that has fueled inflation.
The pandemic has been calling the shots for the economy and for inflation. And if we want to get inflation down, I think continuing to make progress against the pandemic is the most important thing we can do.
And Joe Biden's economic advisor says passing the expensive almost $2 trillion Build Back Better legislation is the key to fighting inflation, which is exactly the opposite from standard economic thinking.
This, more than anything, will go at the costs that Americans face. You talk about health care, one of the biggest costs that American families face. This will lower prescription drug prices, put a cap on prescription drug costs for our seniors.
Economist Stephen Moore told CBN's Faith Nation program, no, that won't lower inflation.
This is kind of a laughable claim by the Biden administration. I think anybody, even with a junior high school education, knows that if you print more money and borrow more money, trillions of dollars, that's going to make inflation worse, not better.
The House is expected to pass Biden's giant social spending plan this week, but the White House needed 19 Republicans to pass the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, and so far no Republicans support this latest bill. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says that if it gets to the Senate, West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin and fellow moderate Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona will have a say. Both have opposed the high price of the spending bill. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is urging the White House to tap the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to help bring down gasoline prices. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And speaking of gas prices, the national average today stands at more than $3.41. We hit the road to speak with people at the pump paying more for that gas just as the holiday approaches.
I drive a eco-efficient car, so it sucks even then. I drive a Toyota Corolla, so going in and paying $25 for a tank and then going in and paying $40, it's not fun. No one likes it. I'm a single mom. You know, we don't want to spend our extra hard-earned money on a couple extra gallons of tank or gas because we have to.
Thoughts on the gas prices is that they're pretty high for right now, even being a Virginia native and local. Just recently, it's been really, really unfortunate, honestly.
Gas prices, I think, is too high because the economy is not paying for minimum wages. and hardly people can't afford gas prices that high.
It is ridiculous. It used to cost me only $30 to fill up my car, and now it's closer to $50, and that's really eaten into my monthly budget and stuff like that. And I understand why, but it's come on, with the whole coronavirus and everything, people trying to recover, one less thing, you know.
Now, if you are still looking to travel during the holiday season, here are some tips to save you. Slow down and drive the speed limit. Avoid hard accelerations. When approaching lights or stop signs, take your foot off the gas early. Allow your car to reach a slower speed before coming to a full stop. Also, use cruise control to maintain a consistent speed. Trump ally Steve Bannon turned himself into federal authorities today. The Department of Justice has charged him for his refusal to comply with a subpoena to testify before the House committee investigating that January 6th Capitol invasion. He's expected to make his initial court appearance virtually. He may be arraigned on charges in the 2-count indictment. Former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows also defied a subpoena and could face similar charges. Republicans accuse Democrats of weaponizing the Justice Department. Meanwhile, new audio reveals former President Trump's reaction to the mob in the Capitol, threatening Vice President Mike Pence's life. Members of the crowd chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," as Secret Service agents sought to get him to a secure place. In an ABC News interview, the former president gave his interpretation of the scene.
Were you worried about him during that siege? Were you worried about his safety?
No, I thought he was well protected, and I had heard that he was in good shape.
You're saying hang Mike
Because
Pence.
it's common sense, John. It's common sense that you're supposed to protect. How can you, if you know a vote is fraudulent, right? Yeah. How can you pass on a fraudulent vote?
So far, no response from the former vice president to those comments. In another development, a federal court granted the Trump's legal team's bid for a temporary injunction on records sought by that House committee. This comes after a judge ruled the documents are not protected by executive privilege. The Senate's longest-serving member is stepping down when his term expires. Vermont Democrat Patrick Leahy will finish his 8th term in 2023, capping nearly a half-century in the Senate. As president pro tem, he is third in line of the presidential succession after the vice president and Speaker of the House. The 4th longest-serving senator in history, the 81-year-old Leahy won his first election back in 1974. Another setback for President Biden's COVID vaccine mandate. Friday, a 3-judge panel ruled its block on the mandate will remain in effect, calling it, quote, fatally flawed and staggeringly overbroad. It said the mandate raises serious constitutional concerns. The ruling came from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which originally blocked the mandate from going into effect. Meanwhile, the number of COVID cases is expected to rise again as winter arrives, but experts do not believe it will be as bad as last year.
We're expecting the surge this winter to be much lower than what we have seen last winter, simply because more people are vaccinated. Cases will go up, but mortality will not go proportional to what we have seen before.
Some states have already begun rolling out vaccines for booster shots. Here now are some stories we're following for you in the CBN newsroom. Austria ordered a nationwide lockdown for unvaccinated people to combat the rising COVID cases and deaths. Leaders are concerned hospital staff will not be able to handle the growing influx of COVID patients. The move prevents about 2 million people from leaving their homes unless they're doing basic activities like going to work or grocery shopping. The lockdown is expected to last at least 10 days. Democrat Beto O'Rourke is running for governor of Texas in 2022. He's going up against Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who is up for a 3rd term. Abbott's approval ratings have taken a hit recently with the handling of the COVID pandemic. But Abbott believes that voters will not forget O'Rourke calling for mandatory buybacks of assault weapons and his actions on climate change. Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers deployed about 500 National Guard troops today as a safety precaution during the closing arguments in the Rittenhouse trial. Rittenhouse is on trial for shooting 3 people and killing 2 of them. This happened last year after the police shooting of Jacob Blake. Rittenhouse is claiming self-defense, but prosecutors say he is a vigilante who instigated the chain of events that night. Each side has 2.5 hours for closing arguments, with jury deliberations to follow. Coming up, One was president, the other a slave. How Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass defied the United States after the Civil War. We're going to have a look at their complex relationship. It's all coming up right here on CBN NewsWatch and return after this brief break. Welcome back. A president and a former slave, Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, defined Civil War-era America. Fox News host Brian Kilmeade explores the complicated relationship between these two historic figures in his latest book. He spoke with CBN's Jenna Browder about the unlikely alliance between the president and the freedom fighter.
From George Washington and Thomas Jefferson to Sam Houston, Brian Kilmeade has written about them all. And moving right on down the line in American history, his newest book intertwines the stories of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass.
I wanted to move gradually up until I hit the future.
But instead of focusing on just one man this time,
I thought, what about how they interacted together and how they made the country better and the incredible obstacles they had to overcome to do what they did.
And that resulted in the president and the freedom fighter, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, and their battle to save America's soul. Brian tells the little-known story of how these two American heroes moved from strong disagreement to friendship, and in the process changed the course of history. Both men had to overcome huge adversity, especially Douglass, who was born a slave.
Born a slave, literally sold, and then after one failed escape, finally gets out, was able to live his life, and remarkably, within 7 years, is writing a biography, and it becomes one of the most respected intellects and speakers in the world.
And Lincoln, born into abject poverty, whose parents were illiterate.
And then you have Lincoln, who is basically a self-taught guy. They both had a couple of similarities. They had a lot of similarities. They had a thirst for education. They were going to find out some way, somehow. They were going to barter, do work for a book. They would just have a chance to read and learn about a story. They were buried in the Bible and great thinkers their entire life.
Despite their similarities, there were also deep differences. Most notably, how to approach the big issue of the day, slavery.
You write about how Lincoln wanted to abolish it, but thought that doing it too quickly would really hurt the country.
What happens is, there's no doubt about it, Lincoln evolved. He was not really exposed that much to slavery. Only 1% of all the slaves were in the North. The rest were in the South.
After the United States won its independence, the South built an economy dependent on slavery. Southerners felt an attack on that would destroy their economy and way of life. The North wanted freedom, although not necessarily equality. They saw slavery as morally wrong.
The minute Lincoln gets elected, 7 states leave before he can get to the White House. Frederick Douglass is like, okay, Emancipation Proclamation, free the slaves, let us fight.
But President Lincoln wasn't ready to move that fast. He knew the North wasn't ready and risked losing half of his army by rushing the process.
And Frederick Douglass had a newspaper that he started, and he would write and he lambasted Lincoln. You let me down, going halfway. This is not what you promised. And then as inaugural, in an effort to get us reunified, he said, keep your slaves, we'll work it out. Just come back. And they said no. And that was, Frederick Douglass celebrated that, and Lincoln knew we're in for a war. They thought it would be 90 days, and it was 4 years, and it cost between 600 and 700,000 lives, which is just unthinkable.
Through time, though, the men came to respect one another and even form a friendship.
And then Lincoln would evolve, and it was timing. And people would be pushing him to do it. He's like, I'm not ready. He wrote it out. It wasn't ready. And he's so impatient. Then he realized, we need a big win. After a big win, I'm not only going to come out with the Emancipation Proclamation, I'm going to allow African Americans to fight for their freedom. And when he finally gets a chance to meet Douglass, I don't want to give the whole book away, but you know it historically, Douglass realizes this guy that was frustrating him for the longest time, that he saw so much promise in, was the honest, great man he always thought he was. He saw authenticity, kindness, and greatness. And that was just in the moments in which they met.
And is there a lesson in this book and this story of these two men for us today here?
Yeah, they wanted to be Americans. They want to make America better. So they studied the founding fathers. They studied where we came from. And they said, okay, my country's imperfect, so let's make it better, right? Let's not disparage it. Let's do it in a way that's, call it out, but make it better.
It's the great democratic experiment, and these two men made it better. Not only that, together their grit and determination help the United States begin to live up to its ideals.
Brian, I don't want to get ahead of my skis, but I think a lot of our viewers, they'll pick up this book and then they'll finish it and they'll say, all right, what's next?
No idea. I have no idea.
Writing a book like this is a huge deep dive. Brian says he's going to finish this publicity tour and then maybe this spring start thinking about his next topic. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Still ahead, how one European nation's answer to its border crisis could be a model for the United States. We're going to take a look at their solution when we come back. The chaos at our southern border continues as America's immigration policies are mired in politics and culture wars. One European nation has taken strong action to protect its border, even in the face of intense global criticism. Our Jennifer Wishon traveled to Hungary for this firsthand account.
This is the border between Serbia and Hungary. This is the fence, often referred to as a wall, that draws so much criticism from Western Europe and much of the world. It went up 6 years ago as hundreds of thousands of migrants from Syria and other countries stormed through this Central European country on their way to Germany. A scene that's repeated itself. Today, a warning broadcast in 7 languages.
Approaching the border fence or touching it can cause injury and pain. I urge you to refrain from committing the crime.
Border police say it's still mainly young men trying to cross the border, often approaching the fence in military formations. Hundreds of migrants attempt to cross each day. Riot teams remain on standby, and now officials are bracing for another wave from Afghanistan.
Around 400 Afghans, including the family members, are now in Hungary, and we definitely will take care of them. But here there's a full stop. We will not receive anyone else. We will protect our border, we will withstand the pressure, and we will continue to stick to our own right to make our own decision whom we allow to enter the territory of our country and with whom we are ready to live together.
We're getting an aerial view of the border. Hungarian officials tell us in the summer of 2015, 150,000 refugees were walking across the border every month. They walked miles across a great expanse of quiet farmland, shocking residents.
There were a lot of damage in the agriculture. There were some farms, and just went into the houses, which was very much irritating to the people living here.
General Bakandi George, Hungary's chief national security advisor, was waiting for us when we landed at the border. Could you have curbed this problem without a fence?
Egészen biztosan nem. Kerítés kellett ahhoz, hogy az előzönlést, a határátlépést akadályozzák. Ez nem megy másképp.
In a country with a history of oppressive occupations and a post-World War I treaty that dramatically reduced its size, Hungary is unapologetic about preserving its culture built on the foundation of Christianity.
És nyilvánvalóan a migráció nagyon...
Migration already brought forward huge cultural clash and will bring even more.
Under Soviet rule, Pastor Nemeth Sandor was forced to practice his faith underground. Today, he leads the largest evangelical church in the country.
Tragikus hibának tartanám.
I believe it's a tragic mistake.
Hogy Pál apostolnak az örökségét eltékozolná Európa.
Waste the heritage of the Apostle Paul.
Isten Pál apostolt Európába küldte.
God sent the Apostle Paul.
Ő rakta le Európában a kereszténységnek az alapját.
He laid the foundations of Christianity on this continent.
Senior Hungarian officials tell CBN News it's simple. They don't want a multicultural society.
We think that migration is harmful. It creates parallel societies. It, people losing their roots and their traditions. Also, promoting migration gives room to trafficking organizations and have also many security concerns.
Asbay and other officials say while they're not opposed to legal migration, the government seeks to help people where they are, rather than transporting them to a foreign culture. And in the face of criticism from the European Union and much of the world, Hungary sees securing its borders as key to its survival.
The Judeo-Christian revelation and values are something I am willing to fight for at the moment.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, reporting from Hungary's southern border.
Most children aren't fans of their parents visiting them at school, but we're going to tell you why one daughter was so happy and surprised to see her mom show up. When we come back, stay with us. And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. An Arizona fifth grader received an early Christmas present. Her mom, Army Staff Sergeant Madeline Perez, surprised her daughter at school after serving several months overseas. She was met with a double take, then tears. Perez didn't come empty-handed, bringing balloons and treats, but she quickly made room to hug her daughter, who she hadn't seen since January. Perez said it's heartbreaking being away from family, but she is thankful that her daughter has her family's support, and the holidays this year will be even sweeter. Time now for your Monday motivation. I pray this message will inspire and jumpstart your work week. Things may look bad, but know this. You think things are falling apart, but they're actually falling into place. So hold on to hope and hold on to faith, knowing your Heavenly Father is working out all things together for your good, and He cares for you. I pray you have a marvelous Monday and a wonderful rest of the week. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We look forward to seeing you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye, everybody.